Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to day 3 of Cycle 2015. It's my honor and pleasure to introduce my good friend and fellow investor, Rick Rule. He's not only one of the most successful investors and speculators I know, he's also just a really sharp analytical thinker on just about every subject that we've ever talked about. So with that in mind, Rick, take it away.
Thank you, Lobo. I'd like to begin by noting that we're in the Thanksgiving season in the United States, a wonderful holiday where you pause to give thanks to whatever it is that you feel that you have to be thankful about. And I'd like to begin by being thankful for Cycle, the opportunity to learn and share with so many people around the world, and particularly give thanks to Grace and Lobo for putting this on, as well as the rest of the Cycle staff, and of course, the people, Students for Liberty, International Students for Liberty, and Liberty.me for hosting Cycle. So I'm delighted and fortunate to have so many things to be thankful for, and I want to acknowledge that at the beginning of the talk. The talk itself will have four parts: an introduction to the process of mentoring, where we discuss the topic in a broad sense, a discussion of being mentored, a discussion of mentoring, and then in the time remaining, a question and answer session where I'm certain to deal with things of specific interest to people because of course the people I'm attempting to mentor will mentor me on what they are interested in. So to begin with, it's important to acknowledge that the process of mentoring is very much a two-way street. Both the mentor and the people being mentored have obligations to the process, and they have obligations to each other. And by the way, if it's done successfully, you will find the roles to be very interchangeable, which means that the teacher will have an awful lot of opportunity to learn, both about mentoring and about his or her topic, at the same time that the person that's being mentored will have the opportunity to question the mentor and teach the mentor in the process. It's very important to note that. One of the things that I have learned from giving financial talks for 35 years is that the whole concept that all of the knowledge in the room is at the dais, and that the people in the room who are listening to the speech have nothing to add is completely silly. I was at an investment conference yesterday with a couple hundred high net worth investors, and the idea that all of the knowledge in the room, all of the points in the discussion should logically flow from the dais to the crowd is silly. A two-way interchange is the way that those conversations work best. And it's important to note at the beginning of the discussion on mentoring that it is very, very, very much a two-way street. Both parties must listen to each other and learn. Both parties must teach each other how to communicate in ways that the counterparty understands and gets benefit from. Students in particular must question. This process does two things. It allows the student to make sure that they understand the point that is being made, and it also reinforces the teacher's sense that the lessons have been learned, and by the way, that the lessons are correct. Particularly when mentoring somebody from a discipline other than yours, having the advantage of, as a mentor, of having your own paradigms questioned by somebody who is approaching a question from a different point of view is useful to you, both in terms of teaching what you know and reinforcing the knowledge that you have from a different point of view. In preparation for discussing the relative roles and the relative responsibilities of both mentors and those being mentored, I'd like to briefly discuss several instances I had early in my career of being mentored, and I'd like to discuss how that impacted my career and in fact impacted my life. I think that discussion will help cement in people's mind the importance of the discussion and what each individual, whether or not they intend to mentor or be mentored, can get out of this discussion and the process. The first example I'd like to give goes back to my university days. I had decided that what I wanted to do with my life was to become an international tax lawyer specializing in natural resources. How I decided on that at an early age is, well, I guess it's a question of certain flaws in my character, but anyway, that's what I wanted to do. And I was very aggressive as a young person seeking out mentors. I saw it as a real shortcut to gaining specialized knowledge. My university experience wasn't equipping me in the way that I had wanted to be equipped with advancing my career and advancing my life. And I tried to find people that were in places that I wanted to go and draw the knowledge from them that would enable me to do that. And there was a very fine tax lawyer in Western Canada, one of the finest tax lawyers in Canada, who I came to know. And I approached him and offered to pay him his going rate if he would spend some time with me. He was kind enough to forego the fee and did spend some time with me. And he told me a very interesting thing. I was asking him how I could go about going through law school and becoming a top-rate lawyer, how I could become a good enough lawyer to get hired by his firm. And he said an interesting thing. He said, if you suffer through law school, you will leave law school and we will article you. Articling is a form of internship, during which we will try and disabuse you of most of the knowledge that you just learned at law school. Having done that process, you will become a lawyer. And in 5 years, you will become a relatively good lawyer. I'll hire you, even though you will only be a relatively good lawyer, because you'll be a great rainmaker. You'll be very good at bringing business to the firm. But I think more importantly, Rick, for you to understand, you'll be completely miserable for the process because you are very ill-suited to being a lawyer. I think what you are, Rick, is a businessman. And I think as a businessman, you could be an investor. And one of the very best investors in Canada knows you. You may not know him, but he knows you and likes you. And what I really think you should do is spend some time with him, become a businessman, become an investor, and forget about being a lawyer. That's the best possible advice I could give. And in truth, everything that he said is completely true. He introduced me to a man named Peter Cundall, who is a legend among value and deep value investors. And Peter Cundall in one weekend changed my entire life. So that's an important lesson in mentoring. I did the right thing to begin with. I found the best person I could to give me the knowledge that I was seeking. And the knowledge I got was very different than the knowledge I was seeking, but it truly changed my life. What this lawyer taught me was that although in my own mind I wanted to be a lawyer, those goals were inconsistent with my skills and inconsistent with my interests. What are the lessons? Manifold, of course. Be mentored by the best that you can be and listen to the totality of their message, even if it varies from the information that you want, or perhaps especially if it varies from the interest you want. The next lesson I want to teach in terms of being mentored came from one of my very first employers. This gentleman was a private billionaire in the 70s when being a billionaire was really a big thing. And he became a billionaire by being a very independent thinker. I circled the world for this man and his partner, selling oil and gas working interests, selling oil and gas production, obtaining production credit facilities. A great job for a young person because they let me try every part of their business. At any rate, they were flying me hither and yon, and they were always flying me first class. And the difference in fares between first class and regular in those days were even more extraordinary than they were now. And being a pathological cheapskate, I said to my boss, you don't need to fly me first class. You can fly me economy. I'm young, strong, and both parts of the plane get there at the same time. My boss said to me, you misunderstand the nature of us flying you first class. In the first instance, we want you to feel beholden to us, and we want you to understand that you work for a first-class organization. In the second instance, we fly you first class to eliminate any excuse you might have for failing. If we fly you to London first class, you have less of a way to tell us afterwards that you didn't succeed in London or Tokyo because you were tired. We flew you first class. But the most important part of this lesson, he said, was that if in a year you haven't made us enough money that it doesn't matter how you flew, you're not going to be working for us anyway. That was the most important part of the lesson. One of my goals early on in terms of being mentored was that I came from a household that wasn't poor, but our economic status was perilous. My mother was a single mother and a teacher. And one of the things that I wanted to be was first financially secure and then rich. I understood that, well, money wasn't everything. It could buy a lot of things, and it was very, very good for the nerves. And I questioned many potential mentors, people who were rich, about how it was they got rich and how I got rich. And I found from 7 or 8 entrepreneurs early on, but the most important of whom is my wife, Bonnie, now, whom didn't offer it actually through questioning, that you don't get rich by seeking to get rich. You get rich by delivering utility to other people. And you outcompete other people in delivering utility by doing a job that you dearly love, a job that you would do for free if it didn't pay so well. Remember, it's important. You get utility by giving utility, and you become rich by delivering more utility that you consume. That was an important lesson, and I got it from many, many, many mentors. When you stop working for money, you start making money. When you start working to deliver utility to other people, the utility that you gain from that will accrue exponentially. And then the fourth form of mentorship that I received that I think is useful in the context of this discussion was public speaking. I was a very formulaic public speaker as a young man. And several people who knew me said, "You're very convincing one-on-one, but you're not convincing in a group. What you need to do is have several personal conversations one-on-one, but with a group. Don't speak to a group. Speak to the group as individuals, and you will do well." That and learning how to structure speeches through Xerox Learning System made me an extremely effective public speaker, rather than somebody who had been extraordinarily formulaic, dense, and frankly, very, very, very dull. So let's move on now. Let's begin to discuss the roles of the mentor and the person or people being mentored. And I'm going to talk first about the student or the mentored's role. I think it's important to note, and I did this well when I was young actually, that you identify your mentors based on their specific strengths and skills. Let's say, like me, that your immediate goal is improving your economic situation. It isn't enough, as it turns out, to simply talk to rich people about how to get rich. There are specific strengths that you have that will help you get rich, and it's important to think through, as well as you can, the path that you would like to take to that goal, and to identify mentors based on strengths that aren't merely appropriate to the subject, but more importantly, are specific to your own strengths and skills. I was interested in natural resources. There was no particular reason for me, as a consequence of that, to seek out somebody whose strengths were in, say, technology or real estate or supermarkets. And in resources, I wasn't interested in the more technical aspects of resources. That is, I wasn't interested in the process of engineering. I wasn't interested in the process of geology. I was interested in the process of finance. And so while early lessons that I learned from people who were engineers and were geologists became important, the most important lessons that I learned were people who were interested in natural resource finance. At one point in time, as a young man working my way through university in preparation for a career in natural resource finance, I found myself, oddly, owning restaurants and nightclubs. And I went so far in terms of trying to accumulate knowledge that what I would do is, when a customer came into the bar who had knowledge that I thought was appropriate, I would pour this customer a couple of free drinks, pepper the customer with questions, and then disappear temporarily in the back room where I wrote down the answers in a spiral notebook and went back and repeated the process. And this worked out extremely well for me. The lesson, by the way, is not to get your mentor drunk necessarily, but in fact, to be very careful in selecting your mentors and identify, with regards to the mentors, the specific strengths and skills that they have that are transferable to you. Having said that, there is all kinds of knowledge that you can get that is perhaps collateral or distal from your primary goal that's very useful. And you have to listen, because lots of free tidbits, pieces of information that fall out of a discussion that you hadn't anticipated, will be useful to you. So you have to listen to that, you have to learn, and you have to actively drive the process. It is both important and polite for the person seeking to be mentored to give a specific description of their needs to the mentor. It isn't enough to say, you have some lessons I'd like to learn, please begin to talk. It's important that you give the mentor an outline, a broad outline of the lessons that he or she has, the strengths and skills that they have, the information that they have, the connections that they have that will be useful to you. It's important both in terms of the person who will be teaching you, in terms of their time, and also in terms of your time. Time and knowledge are both scarce resources, and you know, at least at the beginning of the process, better than the person who seeks to teach you, what lessons you want to learn and what skills you need to go forward. I think it's important that you deliver to the person mentoring you what you see as your own strengths, your own weaknesses, and your own characteristics. That is, if you are seeking the mentor's help in overcoming a gap in your knowledge, if you say to the mentor, I'm very strong technically in a certain area, I'm very weak in another area, and I need to build myself up in the area that I'm weak in, acknowledging the strength that I have in a collateral track, that's very, very useful. In terms of weakness, in terms of describing weaknesses, the weaknesses that you describe can be as simple as having a short attention span. It can be as simple as not liking to read. It can be as simple as preferring to learn through narratives rather than learning through other methods. If there are any characteristics of your needs or characteristics of you that you think it would be useful for your counterparty, the person teaching you, to understand, it's important that you describe those early in the discussion so that you can give the person mentoring you a more fulsome picture of the process by which information will be transferred and shared between the supposed student and the supposed teacher. The most important part of being mentored, I think, is to question the lessons. Questioning the lessons does three very important things. It causes you, the person being mentored, to understand the lesson that's being taught in a very fulsome fashion. Responding to stimulus with regards to a lesson cements the lesson in your mind. It also helps the mentor make sure that the lesson that he or she is teaching is being understood. Further, in terms of the two-way transfer of information, it employs your own critical thinking, your own paradigm, your own expertise on the subject at hand. It could be, as an example, that if I was seeking a lesson in mine finance from a geologist who had been successful in economic geology, if I pursued the same topic from a financial point of view that he or she were pursuing from a geological or engineering or technical point of view, both of us could come out with a better understanding of the topic that was being discussed. The final reason that it's important, I think, for you to question the lessons that you're being taught is that you have an obligation to honor your teacher, I believe. And by questioning the lessons, you have at once demonstrated an understanding and an interest and an appreciation for the lessons that you're being taught. But more importantly, from the mentor's point of view, you are giving the mentor an opportunity to learn the lessons more thoroughly, himself or herself, and better yet, learn the lessons from a different point of view. In particular, a student has done a teacher an enormous service if the student can cause the teacher to question their own thinking on topics, question their own processes with regards to analyzing information, to the extent that the teacher can learn about the topic from the student has become the mentor, at least temporarily, and the teacher has become the student. And that's the most, if you will, sacred part, I think, of an information exchange. The next thing I'd like to say to people who are looking to be mentored is listen for subtext and listen for hidden messages. The first instance that I gave, where I went to a lawyer to find out how to be a lawyer, and he showed me very clearly that I shouldn't be a lawyer, is a very dramatic example of subtext or hidden message. It wasn't too well hidden, actually. It was the primary message of his response. But it's important to note that many of the lessons that you might learn in the context of your pursuit of specific information will come in a way that's distal to your primary quest. That is, you will learn anecdotal facts, you will learn anecdotal lessons, you will hear pieces of information that are meant as supporting information for the primary lesson that are very, very important in and of themselves. And there will be messages hidden, almost certainly, and unfortunately I can't tell you what they will be, but there will be hidden messages, there will be subtext that could be as important or could be more important than the primary lesson. Pardon me, I'm gonna have a little drink. The next thing that I think is incumbent on the student is to teach the teacher how to teach. We covered this a little bit in terms of specific descriptions of your needs and weaknesses and characteristics. But as the process goes on between the mentor and the mentored, that is, between the teacher and the student, it's important that the person who is absorbing the information assist the person who is distributing the information in making that process more efficient from both persons' point of view. My wife, as an example, doesn't like to read history books. She doesn't like to read the sort of sociological, anthropological, economic description of a march through time, but she loves history. My wife likes people, and so my wife can learn lots of lessons about history, lots of lessons about sociology, lots of lessons about economics, if they're tucked away in a biography. The march of time experienced through a person's life is the way that she likes information. And if you have special characteristics yourself, or if you see patterns in the teacher's way of imparting information to you that are either effective or ineffective, bringing that up in the process, bringing it up in the interchange of information is invaluable. When I say teach the teacher to teach, it's highly individualistic. It may be that the lessons that you give the teacher about how to impart information are useful across a broad range of students, but that isn't necessarily your job. Your job is to facilitate the flow of information from the teacher to you. So in addition to teaching the teacher how to teach in a very general sense, it's important to teach the teacher how to teach you. What part of the information exchange, what part of the process can be improved, and what part of the process needs to be emphasized to facilitate a more efficient exchange of information. Finally, and this may be the most important part of the dialogue, of all the dialogue, ask your mentor about books, about websites, about other sources of information, and how to use them. The truth is that the time that the two of you have is by nature going to be limited, scarce, and extremely valuable. If there are other sources of information that can reinforce or augment the lesson that you're learning that don't require the time and participation of both of you, other sources of information that you can utilize at times when he or she, when your mentor are not available. This can be invaluable. And the most invaluable thing that mentors can do is assist you in obtaining other mentors that can give you access to informations and lessons that your primary mentor cannot give you. One of the things that you as a student will get from a mentor if you work, in addition to specific information, is that you will get access to a network. This network may be a mentor's network. It may be a group of people who are interested in what you're interested in. It may be a website. It may be a web portal. But the truth is that not all of the information that the student is going to get from the mentor has to do with ideas, strengths, weaknesses, or lessons. A lot of it will be more basic in the sense that it will be paradigm. A lot of it will be information about how to further augment your knowledge. And probably the most important part of it will be introductions to networks of human beings that will assist you in employing the lessons that the mentor is trying to teach you or has taught you. I think I've exhausted that topic temporarily, so what I'm going to do now is move on to the role of the mentor before finally revisiting the interchange between the student and the teacher and opening up the floor for questions. The mentor's role. I've been fortunate in my life to do an awful lot of mentoring, which I think is really, well, it goes to the concept turnabout as fair play. I enjoyed enormous benefits from the mentors that I have had, and I feel an obligation personally to be a mentor, but the other thing is it's become an awful lot of fun for me. I get a lot of joy out of it, which is one of the reasons why I chose to speak on this topic here today. And I think the first thing that a mentor needs to do is identify his or her own specific lessons and strengths and weaknesses. You cannot be all things to all people. One of the things that happens to somebody who has been successful in one walk of life is that people assume that you are successful in many walks of life. People assume that the strengths that you project on one topic are transferable to a host of topics. And any good mentor knows that that is not the case. The truth is that I have been a successful entrepreneur, a successful businessman, and a successful investor. And the consequence of that is that people see me as a success rather than a success in very limited roles. And people ask me for advice that I am completely ill-equipped to answer. The truth is, even in investing, my strengths are, say, credit analysis and securities analysis, and people ask me economic questions, which is, I think, a mistake. So it's important that mentors understand the roles that they are truly strong in and try and restrict the lessons that they seek to teach to lessons where their teaching actually has value. It's important that the mentors choose the students that they can actually help. This is a different way of saying the first thing. It's important that mentors choose students who come to them looking for lessons that the mentor actually has valuable lessons to teach. It's also important, however, that you choose students that you like, that you want to teach, and that you think will benefit from the knowledge that you have to teach. Once again, referring to my first example with regards to the lawyer, I was seeking information from him about how to be a tax lawyer, and he very clearly told me that he thought that was a very bad idea for me. He refused, in his own kind way, to mentor me towards becoming a tax lawyer because he thought, although he was well equipped to teach me how to become a tax lawyer, that he didn't think that it suited my own strengths. And I think every mentor has a role to do that with people who approach them looking for the knowledge that they might have to give. I think in talking to somebody who seeks to be, oh, I want to go back to the first point, that is choosing mentors that you can actually help. It's okay if you want, I think, to acknowledge that you don't like the person who is seeking your help, and that as a consequence of not liking the person or not approving of their goals, that you refuse to mentor them. I think it's very difficult to help somebody that you don't actually want to help, and you're wasting your time and you're wasting their time. I think that probably the most important thing that you can do as a mentor is screen the people that are looking for your help and allocate your time very, very diligently, preferring to allocate your time and take the time of others only when you believe that you are really, truly capable of describing value. And this is a two-way street. You need to have your students participate in this process. You need to, as accurately as you possibly can, describe your abilities, describe the lessons that you have to learn, describe to the potential student how you think that the process of transferring this information might occur. And also, it's extremely important that you describe to the student up front, as early as you can, your commitment levels. The truth is that when I was a young man looking to learn lessons, I was a voracious student. I was a relentless interrogator, and I absorbed way more time from my teachers than I should reasonably have been allocated. It's important that you, as a mentor, set some limits in terms of your commitment, that you not make a commitment that you are unable or unwilling to keep, or even a commitment that you will come to resent. It's important as a mentor that you describe to the potential student exactly what your abilities are, exactly which of your abilities you think that the student would benefit from, and what your commitment levels are to the student. What that means necessarily is that you refuse most assignments. I've never kept track, but I suspect that I honor about 1 in 20 requests, formal requests for mentoring, and I've become very good about describing to students my level of commitment, what I'm willing to do and what I'm not willing to do. It's important early in the process of establishing the relationship between a mentor and the person being mentored that both sides probe the request made by the student very thoroughly, just as the lawyer did with me. It's important that both parties understand the general realm of knowledge being requested, the purpose for that knowledge, the process where that knowledge may be transferred, and any special character traits that might be exhibited either by the student or the teacher. I think the process works best when there's a course description. In fact, an informal contract that describes the nature of the information being transferred and the nature of the process by which that information will be transferred. And by the way, after you have this agreement, it will certainly change over time. It just serves as a foundation. I'm not suggesting that the whole process be formulaic and that the formula be established at the beginning of the process. What I'm suggesting is that a process be established, a foundation be built that one can change as both parties experience an appreciation with each other matures. I have found as a mentor that questioning the student frequently, turning the tables, is an extremely important tool in teaching. I'm not suggesting necessarily that the whole teaching process become Socratic, but I think it's important that the teacher says to the pupil, what do you think about the proposition that? In the context of what we have learned, I think there's 3 possible outcomes from this scenario, A, B, and C. And which outcome do you think is most likely and why? That does 2 things. By forcing the student to take interim, if you will, quizzes, it lets you know that the student has learned the lesson that you're trying to teach the student, and repeating the lesson by answering the question helps, of course, fix the lesson being taught in the student's mind. But much more importantly, it teaches you, the teacher, how the student learns, and it gives you the tools to impart information to the student much more efficiently. And finally, it allows you, the teacher, to learn lessons from the student. Particularly, as I say, if the student comes from a discipline, comes from a different point of view, comes from a different culture, looking at the same problem through a different prism often results in a situation where the teacher's own perception of the lesson, the teacher's own perception of the fact, the teacher's own perception of the process changes. And that, of course, is the most valuable lesson that the student can give back to the teacher. The seventh thing that I think that you need to do, and of course it mirrors the lessons that we learned earlier, is that in the course of mentoring, in the course of teaching, that you give the student the ability to access other sources of information, books, websites, social groups, and that you introduce the student to other students and to other mentors, that you, in fact, help the student develop the same set of social circles, the same set of contacts that I encourage the students to try and extract from you, the teacher. Interactive time between pupil and teacher is both valuable and scarce, and to the extent that the student can get valuable information on his or her own time, separate and apart from the time that they're spending with you, is useful. And it's also in the context of you introducing the students to other mentors, it's also very useful if you ask the student, are there other people who you think, as a consequence of my interest and my knowledge and the need for information that I have, that you can introduce me to? It's important that this be a two-way iterative process. And finally, the last thing that I think mentors must do is they must cause the student to understand that the process and the information being exchanged has value. And it's important that the teacher ask the student to pay for the information. I don't mean pay for the information by exchanging currency. I mean that it's in exchange for giving the student something, some information, some process that's of value. I think that the teacher has the right and, in fact, the obligation to ask for something in exchange. That at once fixes in the student's mind the fact that the process and the information exchanged has value, but it also gives you the ability to get forgiving. And it doesn't matter what it really is, but given that my role in most of this discussion has been to be a mentor, I'm going to ask everybody on this call to consider doing a few things for me. I'm going to ask you to consider emailing me. I'm rrule, R-R-U-L-E, at sprottglobal.com. Comments on the discussion so far so that I can learn how to mentor more people and how to describe mentoring better. I'm going to ask you to email me books that you think I should read, lessons that you think I should learn, and contacts that you think I should have. I think I spent a lot of time preparing this speech. I think you owe it to me. And I think it'll cement some of the lessons that you've learned in this speech and make them of value. I would like you to consider, as a consequence of the lessons that you learn at Cycle, I would like you to consider joining Liberty.me, a website that's brought me enormous value. And in return for you considering joining Liberty.me, if you think in an informal sense that I can be of use mentoring you, if you ask me the questions in public forums on Liberty.me, I will endeavor to answer those questions in public forums in Liberty.me. As that community expands, you benefit and I benefit. And I'd like to also encourage all of the young people in this group who are not members of Students for Liberty to become members of Students for Liberty. And I'd like to ask any of the old monocle-wearing rich people like myself to consider sponsoring Students for Liberty in some way, shape, or form, or giving money to Liberty.me so that people who can't afford memberships can have scholarships, and we can continue this type of knowledge sharing and libertarian membership in a forum that all of us can conveniently access it. So let's review what we've learned before we open the floor to questions and answers. We've learned that the process of mentoring and being mentored mirrors each other. We've learned that both parties have obligations to the other which are not immediately apparent. And having an iterative two-way process where the teacher becomes the student on occasion and the student becomes the teacher are important. We have learned that it's important for the student to choose their teachers very specifically and assist their teachers in the process of knowing how to understand, how to transfer information, both generally and specifically to that teacher. The mentors should have learned that you need to that you need to choose your students with equal care. The greatest utility to yourself and the greatest utility to society is to teach lessons where those lessons generate the greatest utility. And being extremely segregating with regards to who you choose to spend time and effort with ultimately works to the benefit even of those who you refused to teach. It's important that as a teacher you become a student too. Your students have lots to teach you, both about the process of teaching and also about the very subject you choose to teach about, because their experiences, their values, their skill sets are different than yours. And looking at a question from a different point of view is always a very good thing. I have learned an awful lot from students, often to my chagrin, about the fact that the basic lesson I was imparting was in some way, shape, or form wrong. And you as a teacher will benefit from this process. Finally, as a teacher, I think it's important that you ask for something in return. I don't think I can tell you what to ask for because I don't know what your values are. And I think, frankly, what you get in return is less important than the fact that you asked for it and established both in your mind and the mind of the person being taught that the process of exchanging the information and the information that was exchanged had value. I think this is absolutely critical. So with that, what I think I'm going to do is call for questions, assuming there are some, so that you can teach me what information I have to impart that is of value to you. But finally, I want to thank you an awful lot for taking the time and showing me the respect to sign on to this course.
Very good. Thank you very much, Rick, for those wise words. And it occurs to me that I forgot to mention that you have actually been a mentor of mine for many years, for which I am grateful, and I thank you in public. A vast contribution to my own whatever success I have. You've been a big part of it. So I don't know if you can see the questions in the chat on the side, but I can read them to you if you can't.
You'll need to read them to me. I can see you, I can see Grace, and that's it.
Okay, all right. Well, excuse me. The first question is, do you have a definition of what mentoring actually is? I mean, in some ways this whole talk is, but do you have a definition for the word?
Well, I would suggest that the mentor is the guide in the exchange of information between a party that is believed to have the information and a party that believes they need or want the information. I guess if I had to define it, that's how I would define it. But I'd define it pretty loosely.
I understand. All right. We also had a question of, do you look for something specific when looking for a mentor? And we actually got this question of Doug yesterday also, like, how do you find a good mentor? And if I can expand for just a moment, I mean, I had numerous experiences in my university days when the last thing in the world the teacher wanted was to be taught. And they were there to give me the wisdom of God engraved in stone, and how dare I question anything they'd say. And I suspect that a lot of the students in our audience have encountered a few individuals like this. So how do you go out finding the real mentors out there? Is there a way to identify them, or you just try and fire them as they fail?
I think try and fire them is one thing, but I found in university, I was not a really good student, Lobo, as you know, but there were some professors in university that just, I don't know, it just occurred to me that if I went and visited them off hours, I guess it didn't occur to me not to do it. And what I found for some of the professors that were really pathologically boring in class, if a student had exhibited the interest and the passion to approach them with specific questions, which suggested that the student had actually deigned to listen to the lecture, that a whole different process evolved with regards to teaching. You know, the professor would say, "Oh my God, you know, this guy's actually interested. He's not one of those people who had his eyes shut snoozing off during my lecture." So I agree with most of what the questioner said with regard to the fact that the process in university is often anything but iterative. But I have also found that some of the teachers who were the most jaded became the most forthcoming when I approached them with my young, ruthless determination to extract the knowledge that I thought was valuable to me. But I think a curious mind causes you to run across an awful lot of people. And running across those people will cause you to identify people who it is at least worth your while to approach for information.
That's a good answer, and I don't want to take the microphone away from you, but I can say that I've personally experienced what you're talking about. I had I had an experience in university where the professor was just not having any of it, and I argued it stupidly, threw down the gauntlet, and argued with him on his most cherished beliefs. And in that process, he understood that I was actually paying attention and was interested in what he was interested in. And he gave me one of 2 A's he had given in his entire career at the university. True story.
Well, thank you for making my point. That's delightful.
Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to catch up with the questions here. Let's see. Look for something specific. All right. Somebody says, not necessarily on mentoring, just curious, what does your typical day look like?
That's a question that's hard to answer because I don't have a typical day. The nature of what I do for Sprott is that we sort of respond to opportunities as they occur. So I may be, as I was today, at an investment conference, and then have a meeting, as I will today, about a philanthropic activity, and then teach a course online, and then go have a business meeting. Another day, I might actually get up in my own office and go about doing securities analysis. The truth is that the great news and the bad news about my life is that I do something that I'm very passionate about, but I probably have 6 or 7 different ways that I add value to my clients and my customers and my organization. Of course, other days on weekends, I often have the opportunity to spend some alone time with my wife, hiking or something like that. But the truth is, what I can say is that every day, every single day, is extremely busy.
Yes, I'm well aware of that. I think when I work, you're always there before me and answering emails, and I'm getting stuff from you, and you're still working when I have to call it quits for a day. We only have a little bit of time left because I know that you need to go somewhere else soon. So if we can get a couple more in here quickly. Somebody wants to know, is it possible to do this kind of mentoring remotely via Skype and whatnot, or is it really something that has to happen effectively person to person?
That's a fantastic question, and I think it's an experiment that this entire group should engage in. I think that we should start a mentoring discussion group at Liberty.me, and I think we should find out just how easy it could be to do this in other ways. The iterative discussion, the two-way discussion, I have found works better face-to-face, just like I have found high-level selling works better face-to-face, and negotiating sticky situation works better face-to-face. Because in my life, there's an awful lot of communication that's nonverbal. There is, in the course of a contentious board meeting, a lot of work that gets done during the breaks or in the washroom, not in the meeting. But I think it's important, given the new tools of technology that we have, that we find out how to do it in ways other than one-on-one direct personal interaction. And I would propose that this entire group, through the facility of Liberty.me, have a mentoring discussion group on Liberty.me, and we find out just exactly how it is we do these things. I think it's a great question, and I propose an experiment.
That's a great answer. All right, and I know you need to go, so why don't we go ahead and thank you there. I've got a couple more questions, but you've already said that you're willing to interact and and accept payment via Liberty.me. So I will post these in the discussion forums, and we can go from there.
That's perfect, Lobo. Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you all.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rick.
Bye.